preparation for Pesach. If we have time today, we will also talk about the Passover connection. And now, this shiur is going to be pretty different than the regular shiurim that we normally have, because that we're going to do now a zoom out. Okay, we're going to look at the history of mankind from a different perspective, to look at global history in a general way, and to try and understand what is the reason that mighty civilizations collapse, like the Egyptian civilization, which was that's right, and the Romans. The Roman civilization, it took them 300 years to totally collapse.
The common link between them started up bad idea.
That is right. Here's another common link between them, which we are going to see. And then we're going to try and understand the reason, and also, if we have time, to also analyze the way that the civilizations collapse. And this is not only important for historical perspectives, but it is also important to understand this, to understand the foundations of the world as Hashem created it. This is built in to the creation of the world, the process of the collapse of the civilizations. And it is also important to understand today, because today there are dictatorships, there are tyrannical regimes, that if we look at them and we understand the foundations, which we are going to learn momentarily, we are going to understand it is going to give us optimism, and as we studied previously, there is a difference between optimism and hope. Rabbi Jonathan Sachs used to say that the difference between optimism and hope, it is that optimism, it is the belief that the world is going to change and it is going to be a better place in the future. But hope, it is the belief that we have to change the world. So, by learning about the collapse of the civilizations, there is a difficulty. There is a problem which we have to address. And the difficulty is that, as we are going to see, that the dictatorships and the tyrannical regimes, they collapse in the long run. Now, this is dangerous. At just a moment, this is dangerous, because but we could say, okay, if we're going to collapse in the long run, we don't have to do anything about it. This is optimism, but Judaism is not an optimistic faith. How could we be optimistic after everything that we've gone through? So, we do not believe in optimism. We believe in hope. We believe that we have to fight dictatorships. We have to do a tikkun olam. We have to change the world. So that is why this shiur is a dangerous shiur, because that this shiur it could have us stay in the frame of mind that the world is going to change for the better, because with the dictatorships they collapse. But we have to over time understand, remember, even when we are going to study what we're going to study, that it is up to us. We cannot just let the laws of nature and the angel of history to turn the pages in the history book. We have to make an effort. We have to change the world. So what I ask you is to remember this whilst we study this issue. And in that case, if a shiur is a dangerous shiur, why are we studying it? And the answer is because that knowing that the tyrannical regimes are going to decline, are going to collapse, it gives us strength to fight them, because what we know that at the end we are going to win. Yes.
One thing I wanted to add is that when an empire gets so big, its administrative structure is no longer capable of governing it as much, because there's such a vast, wide geography to rule over, and so many people to rule over. It has to essentially divvy its administrative divisions into smaller and smaller districts, etc., whatever you want to call it, and give them more autonomy. If not, then it's the more centralized such a big entity is, the more likely it's going to rule.
That's why the states are falling apart, giving the government too much power.
That's one of the reasons.
That is true. That is actually one of the reasons of the collapse of Rome, which we are going to see in the book, The Story of a Civilization by Will Durant, who was a famous American historian. Yes?
Another reason is that they kept on minting virtual coins. That's another reason.
They crash their economy. They stopped fighting people. War is a good thing. They're shutting down. Very important to fight people.
That's right.
Very, very important to fight people.
So let us then begin. And the key source which we are going to study today is a chapter 92 in the Psalms, in the Tehillim. It is a chapter that we say every Leil Shabbat during a Kabbalat Shabbat, Mizmor Shir LeYom HaShabbat. That's right. This one also on Shabbat, Nachon?
4 times.
Mm-hmm. So this is a very, very important chapter, but it actually folds inside it the whole history of mankind. And yes?
Did the reason that writes Sefer Tehillim out of boredom? Or the other reasons?
Out of a prophecy, out of prophecy.
Oh.
David wrote most of it.
David the Melech.
The book of Tehillim is
David.
we didn't form a prophecy. It is all a divine prophecy. Okay, so you could see it over here. I am first going to read it in Hebrew, and then the translation is going to come. מזמור שיר ליום השבת. טוב להודות להשם ולזמר לשמך עליון. להגיד בבוקר חסדך ואמונתך בלילות. Now this is very, very important, which is not connected deliberately to this shiur, but since it is such an important verse, so I just want to pay attention for 2 minutes, because when it talks about the faith of God in man, it says, Ve'emunatcha balilot, your faith in the nights. Now it is very strange. So what faith does God have? It should be our faith in God. So one time Rabbi Jonathan Sachs was interviewed by Sir David Frost, and he asked him, Chief Rabbi, do you believe in God? Or do you know that he exists? So Rabbi Jonathan Sachs asked him, he told him that it is way more important than we believing in God, than understanding that God believes in us. And this is actually understood in the pasuk ve'emunatcha balilot. So this is a very important introduction to the whole verse, because if one, the whole chapter, and also to the whole history of mankind, because when one could look at the history of mankind and say, what a terrible story. Mankind is filled with evil, only thinking about bad things the whole day, as it says in the Parashat Noach. Nevertheless, God believes in mankind. God believes in us. And this is extremely important to understand this, because the faith that God has in us gives us hope. It gives us hope that we can change the world to make it a better place. We can do a tikkun olam. So this is an extremely, extremely important introduction to understand the history of mankind. I'm going to continue in verse 4. Alei asor v'alei na v'alei higayon b'chino. Yismechtani Hashem b'folecha b'masei yadecha aranen. Magadlu ma'asecha Hashem ma'od amku machshavotecha. And this is very, very important, that Hashem's thoughts are profound. They are at the time, so it is very hard for man to understand why certain events happen. But afterwards, when we see the perspective, sometimes after many years, or sometimes after thousands of years, we finally understand, or sometimes we never understand. But one has to know that Hashem's thoughts are deeper than the understanding of man. Now, ish ba'al lo yada, uchasil lo yavin et zot. B'feroach resha'im k'mo esev, v'yatzitzu v'kol polei aven el hishamda madei ad. So there is a very difficult question. When the wicked spring up as weeds, and all the tyrants flourish. We sometimes see that the wicked and the tyrants are very, very strong. They control half the world sometimes. They crush the civilizations. They are so strong and powerful. But we have to see that there's a continuation. It says, Lehishamdam adayad. That is so that they may be destroyed forever. So, this is something very confusing and also very fearful, that we see that the wicked are so strong and powerful, that the tyrannical regimes are very close to have nuclear weapons. They can destroy the whole world. But we have to know that is so that they may be destroyed forever. That even if we see that the evil is strong and powerful, we must understand that it is only temporary. And then we're going to continue. Ve'ata marom le'olam Hashem, ki hine oivecha Hashem, ki hine oivecha yovedu, yipardu kol פועלי אבן. ותרם כרם קרני בלעתי בשמן רענן, ותמא את עיני בשורי בקמים עיניים מרעים תשמענה אוזני. צדיק, כתמר יפרח, כארז בלבנון יזכה, שתולים מבית השם בחצות אלוקינו יפריחו. The righteous will flourish like the palm tree. He will grow tall like the cedar in Lebanon. So, what types of trees, plants do we have in this verse, in this chapter?
Cedars.
That's right. Palm trees and also weeds. Okay. So let's try and analyze. What advantage do weeds have over trees?
Water.
That's right. They stay out of the water. Whatever.
Grow back after you cut them. You have to get them at the root to get rid of them.
Spread quickly.
That's right. They spread very, very quickly. A palm tree to grow, it takes years. Weeds, it takes a very short time, weeks. So, and what advantage do trees have over weeds?
They last longer.
That's right. So, this is an allegory for the tyrannical regimes, for evil versus the righteous and just societies, moral societies. And the connection is this, that it is true that tyrannical regimes, they are very powerful, they are able to spread quickly, they accumulate lots of might and power very quickly. However, it is important to understand that in the long run, they are going to be destroyed, and only the righteous and the just societies, the societies that are based on morality, they are going to be eternal. They are going to prevail. A free society that the values of the human rights and of the freedom, these societies are going to, their light is never going to fade. So this is a very important chapter to understand the history of mankind. Now, if you look, please, it says over here, it says in verse number 2, a man bare of reason does not understand, nor does he consider it for comprehend this. So the question is, what is the connection to not understanding? Because this should be not an intellectual test, it should be a test in faith. So it is not a question of intellect or the lack of intellect. It is supposed to be faith, that we believe that the righteous are going to prevail and that tyrannical regimes are going to collapse. We have faith in God that this is going to be the course of history. However, King David in the Psalms says otherwise. He says, but this is a test in intellect, an intellectual test of the ability to understand history. So, why is that so? It should be a test of faith. So what do you say? How do you understand this? So the answer is that it is not really a test in faith at all. It is a matter of pure intellect. And this is something that whoever traces the course of history can see. You don't need a special faith for this. You don't have to you don't have to learn the Psalms for this. If you just look at crystal clear, you can see what happens in history. And you could see over here in a source too that a James Fraud was a British historian who delivered a lecture at the Royal Institution on February 5th, 1864. So he says this: what then is the use of history, and what are its lessons? If it can tell us little of the past and nothing of the future, why waste our time over so barren a study? First, it is a voice forever sounding across the centuries the laws of right and wrong. Opinions alter, manners change, creeds rise and fall, but the moral law is written on the tablets of eternity. For every false word or unrighteous deed, for cruelty and oppression, for lust and vanity, the price has to be paid at last, not always by the chief offenders, but paid by someone. Justice and truth alone endure and live. Injustice and falsehood may be long-lived, but doomsday comes at last to them in French Revolution or other terrible ways. So with James Freud is actually saying exactly what King David taught us, that falsehood and a tyranny and oppression, they are going to collapse. They are not going to stay forever. Only justice prevails. And after that he says, one lesson and only one history may said to repeat with distinctness, that the world is built somehow on moral foundations, that in the long run it is well with the good, in the long run it is ill with the wicked. But this is no science. it is no more than the old doctrine taught long ago by the Hebrew prophets. So, this is something that if you look at history, you can see. And we are going to analyze here two examples. I don't know if we'll have time for the second one, but the first, two historical examples of great civilizations that ruled half of the world. However, they were built on oppression. They were built on slavery, both of them. They were built on tyranny. They were built on immorality, injustice. And because they were built on these foundations, in the long run they collapsed. And I am talking about the Roman civilization, and before that the Egyptian civilization, which I don't know if we'll have time today to talk about that, but if we do so, we'll do it. And if not, it will be a different. That's right. Yes, Sodom is a very good example of that, because it was based on terrible crimes and the worst crimes ever. So it was destroyed. So Will Durant was a famous American historian, and he wrote a set of books called The Studies of History, and one of his books was the Story of a Civilization, and he's got in the third volume 600 pages on the Roman civilization, and at the end of the book there is the epilogue where he talks about why Rome fell. Okay? So he says like this: a great civilization is not conquered from without until it has destroyed itself within. The essential causes of Rome's decline lay in her people, her morals, her class struggle, her failing trade, her bureaucratic despotism, her stifling taxes, her consuming wars, and Ben Abiendi says, moral decay contributed to the dissolution. So we could see that the Roman civilization, which was based on a slavery, based on oppression, one could have thought that they would last forever, but they, at the end, fell. And at the end, it says in the Talmud that there's a story that at one time Rabbi Akiva and the sages, they were walking and they saw the great cities of Rome, of a Roman civilization. And when all of the sages cried because they saw how powerful Rome was, but Rabbi, what? Yeah, that's right. And then Rabbi Akiva laughed.
Yeah, he was laughing a lot. When they say the basic Mikdash is destroyed and the fire runs right in, he's the only one laughing. When they hear a bunch of Romans out of theater laughing and doing all this and having fun, everyone else cries except for he laughs. He just loves to laugh a lot for some reason.
The truth is that Rabbi Akiva was able to see things differently than others. He was able to see the inner source of everything, and then he always used to say, "Kol man David Rachmana le'yatav avid," that everything that Hashem does, it is all for the good. We are going to see the good that it comes out of it. So he laughed because that he knew what the American historian Will Durant is going to say 2,000 years afterwards, that talking about how the Roman Empire collapsed. Because but Rabbi Akiva understood that exactly what the King David said, and that what the James of Rhodes said, and that at the end, it doesn't matter how powerful a regime is, it doesn't matter how great they become, what weapons they have. At the end, any regime or civilization that is based on oppression, based on tyranny, is going to collapse. It is not going to prevail in the long run. So that is why Rabbi Akiva laughed, because he understood that only the light of morality is never going to fade. And the Third Reich was supposed to 1,000 years.
They got to 12.
As Hitler said in 1934 in Nuremberg, he said that it's going to last for 1,000 years, and as you said, it only lasted 12. The Soviet Union, it collapsed after 69 years. So what King David says when he talks about those who do not understand, he is saying that the thought that the temporary success of evil means that the evil is strong and powerful. This is not true, because that whoever examines the lessons of history can understand, as James Ford and Will Durant and many others understood the lessons of history. It is impossible not to see how evil is temporary. So every other thought is a complete nonsense, because that only understanding in this way human history, there is no other way to understand it. So we're going to now ask the question, why does evil collapse? So we saw that it is the law of history, but why is it so? Why does evil collapse? So what do you say?
Well, we could say it's because HaKadosh Baruch Hu truly controls the entire world, controls the entire outcome of the world. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is good. Therefore, although HaKadosh Baruch Hu Hashem creates evil, Hashem does not create it to prevail. Hashem creates it to have it good. Therefore, when He creates the evil, He creates it so that it will fail. Sometimes it takes longer than others, but it will always fail because it's created as such.
Mm-hmm. Very nice. Rabbi Hirsch has got a beautiful commentary on the Tehillim, on the Psalms. And he says that there is a law of nature that Hashem embedded in history, in the world, that, as you said, that the good prevails, and the bad and the evil collapses at the end. Rabbi Hirsch has said, you could see over here in a source number 6, no human society can continue to exist without morality and respect for what is right. This is the order of the world as God created it, and it is by this immutable law of creation that evil and violence will perish. So this is the law of nature that...
That's why Stalin and Hitler finished, because they were evil. Maybe not the Soviet Union altogether, but at least those people who started it were gone.
That's right, and also their regimes, they only exist now in the dusty pages of history and in museums. However, there is another answer which is very similar to the first, but it is from a different perspective. That evil destroys itself. And this is something very, very important to understand. So, it says in the Midrash, that before the flood, so Hashem had told Noah to bring into the ark 2 from every species in the world. So also falsehood also wanted it to come into the ark. But Noah said, but you can't enter the ark because you have to have a partner. So falsehood went and found destruction. So he asked the destruction, are you willing to be my partner so I could enter the ark? So the destruction said yes, but in a one condition. What was the condition? So he said, I am going to do a deal with you that everything that I'm going to get, you can take out. So if they did the deal, that everything that a falsehood earns, so a destruction it takes out. So after the flood, the falsehood is said to destruction, why are you taking everything that I earn? So the destruction said, this is the deal that we did. So it says in the Midrash that this was the course of the history from now on. So this is a very interesting Midrash, and as we know that the words of a Chazal, they can't be understood literally. There are deep concepts, deep ideas which are in the words of a Chazal. So when we study this Midrash, so we are waiting for the tryst. in the tale, because that we are waiting for the twist that at the end falsehood is not going to tell the truth, is not going to honor the deal that it did with the distraction. So why didn't a falsehood lie? It is against its nature to honor the deal with the distraction. So what do you say? What is the answer? There should have been a different ending to this midrash, to the story. So the answer is that a falsehood didn't have any choice, because the law of nature that the world is based on, that falsehood always brings a distraction. It goes together. It is impossible and not to have these two linked together. It says, this is something interesting in the Hebrew alphabet. I am looking for a pen.
Oh, they're up here.
Okay, thanks. Thank you. So it says something very, very interesting. It says, falsehood in Hebrew is sheker, right?
They're all standing on one leg.
That's right. So everything only stands on the one leg. You could see the shin, the kuf, and the resh. But emet, it stands on two legs. You could see it is a stable, because with a falsehood it always collapses. It cannot stand. On the long run, temporary it could stand, but it can't prevail. That's right, it is unstable. So this is what it says in Chazal. Kushta kai, kushta in Aramaic is emet, is a truth. It is a stable, it stands. But shikra, falsehood, it does not prevail. So justice and morality, they are eternal, but falsehood and evil, they destroy themselves. And now we are going to conclude with a famous story about the downfall of a tyrant. Okay? So it says in the verse that we read, "Before Reshaim kamo esev, v'yatzitzu kol pa'alei aven lehesham dama de'ad." So the translation of this is, as we read, that when the wicked they spring up as weeds, and all the tyrants flourish, that is so that they may be destroyed forever. And the chidush is that the tyrant actually destroys himself. Why is that? What do you say? Why is that so?
Because at the end, the light will always prevail over the darkness.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Yeah. So Rabbi Hirsch says that a tyrant, so he first gives an example for all of those surrounding him, that one should lead their lives in a false way, in a way of evil, and he causes how do you say, avira, no, not an avira, a avira,
Like an
with a, what?
Like an atmosphere.
Right, nachon, an atmosphere of a falsehood and an oppression, and then everything comes back to him. And there's a famous story which I would like to tell you about. You could. I don't have a lot of handouts, so if you could look at it together. You could see over here that Rabbi Hirsch says like this: if leaders of human society demonstrate by their own evil example how power can be used for selfish gain, and that the motive which guides the acts of men is not the standard of moral worth, but of measures of a possibility of success, the result will be the spread of contempt for everything that is morally good, and the dissemination of a blind worship of success in every stratum of society. Even the mightiest man will perish through his own wicked example. He has deprived the masses of every vestige of moral conscience, for as a result of a demoralization which he himself will have spread among his fellows, he will eventually find no man whom he himself can really trust. Conversely, it has always been true that whenever nations have succumbed to moral corruption, they have produced tyrants, who in turn proved to be the scourges of whose hands the corrupted masses suffered and perished in the end. In either case, personal tyranny and nation-wide corruption ultimately lead to each other's ruin. No direct act of divine intervention is needed for this purpose. So there's a famous example for what a Rabbi Hirsch says from Shakespeare, from Julius Caesar. Does anyone know the story of? That's right. So it is. You're talking about the assassination of.
15th of March.
Right.
Joke.
Of a Julius Caesar. And so Shakespeare actually emphasizes this idea that at the critical moment, a tyrant is unable to trust anyone, not even the closest people to him. So in the play, so it describe how a group of a Senate they decide to assassinate Julius Caesar because that he was the dictator and he wanted to become the king, and they were able to bring in their group also the best friend of a Caesar, Brutus. And when, as you said, at the 15th of March, when Caesar was in the Pompeius hefeder. So they attacked him. And when in his last moments, so we saw Brutus, his best friend, the man who he trusted the most, who assassinated him. So according to Shakespeare, the last words of the Caesar was, "You too, Brutus?" So he couldn't understand how his best friend betrayed him. But this is exactly what Rabbi Hirsch is telling us, that a tyrant brings his own downfall, because that he influences his surroundings, because that he, as he says over here, because that he corrupts his surroundings. So at the end he cannot trust anyone. So in this we are going to conclude this part of the shiur, and B'ezrat Hashem, next time we are going to talk about the Egyptian civilization, and this is the connection to a Passover. Because within Leil HaSeder, where we understand the idea that justice and freedom and morality, they exist forever. This is the strongest. It is true that it seems that tyrannical regimes are very powerful, but they are powerful for now, but in the long run they are going to collapse, because with only the light of morality is never going to fade. So, B'ezrat Hashem, until the next time. Thank you.